A little while ago, a friend of mine asked me to do a video that was like a walkthrough of what's going on sort of behind the scenes in Carrion. So I figured I'd do that here. So I think I'm just gonna like walk through sort of what's happening on each channel and how everything's laid out. So to start with, there's this group channel. I'm doing a lot of group processing, which I'll get to in a sec. So this channel is a bus group of this sort of pair of a kick drum and sort of the sub. The kick drum is just the drum synth kick from Ableton. I've really given up on using samples. I can't ever get the result that I want using kick drum samples. So I just started using this drum synth kick. It's a Maxer Live device. And I get really, I'm pretty happy with the result that I get out of it. Just reverb on it. So that's kind of all that this first chain is. It's really just that kick drum. But this other layer of things is a synth that, let's see if I turn that off. So it's an analog that's just generating a couple sine waves. But then I'm doing a bunch of different effects to it. So the first one is distortion. And I'm doing this erosion effect. So let me turn off everything. It's just sort of adding a little hiss. I'm also doing a pedal, so basic distortion. And then the sort of really important thing, I think, is the trash 2. So this is the only non-native effect that I'm actually using in this whole set. And you can kind of see what it's doing. If I turn off some of those things here, you'll see better. Just sort of adding some warmth, really, and a little bit of buzz. And then I'm doing some EQ to really brighten it up and emphasize a thing here, and then doing some pretty hefty compression. All that together, all of those sort of distortions stacked together really sound like this. But if I take that sound along with the kick drum and add them together, get a real beefy kind of sound to it. And I am modulating the wet dry on the distortion here. So that's this. And that's actually modulating all of the different wet dry controls for the 3 effects, right? So amount here, wet dry in this, and the wet dry on the pedal. Everything on the kick drum is really mapped to one of these controls. So let me turn this off. Change the pitch. And I can add pretty beefy overtones. It has its own drive control, which... And then I can change the attack on the thing, which is pretty useful. And on this synth, which is, again, it's sort of a sub bass. Let's switch this. I really have a lot of control over the character of the sound. And if I do sidechain it, it's always sidechained to the kick. So the sum of things, as I sort of played in the beginning. So there's that. The next thing that's in this channel is just this noise. And the noise is gated to the kick. It's gated so that when the kick plays, it doesn't play. But if I turn the gate off, it passes through. And that's really just being done with an analog with the noise filter here. And I do have a lot of control over the color of the noise, and then it controls over the color. It's got a saturator on it. And then a thing that I think is super cool is this tremolo. It's really an auto pan that's sort of set in mono mode, right? And I can control the rate of that. And then that's also sidechained to the kick. So the two of those played together really have this as the result. Let's do that. And they are both being sent into this gated reverb, which I'll show you. It's pretty basic. Like there's a delay and a reverb that has some modulation going on in the low end. And then a pair of LFOs that are modulating that EQ. And then a gate. And the gate is sidechained to the kick. So... here's without. And then here's with. So that's a pretty simple effect that does kind of a lot, in my opinion. So that's really how the kick and the low end are both operating along with this kind of scratchy, skittery noise that's up top. Next thing, let's talk about this group of channels here. First thing, sort of easiest, is this noise channel. It's really equivalent to the noise on the earlier channel. It's equivalent to this noise. It's just being utilized in a very slightly different way. So if I... So the tremolo rate is much, much higher. And again, it's being gated across the kick. Yeah, so it's sidechain gated. So it really only opens when the kick opens. The thing going on in this channel here is a little more complicated. You can see it's an instrument rack inside an instrument rack inside an instrument rack. But if I pull open this, you can see it's really just an analog playing sine waves in the same octave. and I have the ability to tune them or detune them. At the end, there's sort of this basic stuff that we've seen throughout everything else so far, where there's a filter and a gate that's sidechained to the kick and a compressor that's sidechained to the kick, doing some gain maintenance there, and then just adding distortion at the end. So let's sort of dismissing all of that and the filter, let's kind of work our way backwards. So here in this instrument rack, it's two of the same set of synths, right? They're tuned a little differently, but basically it's the same thing. And this lower one goes into a pair of distortions. So the distortion wet-dry control all the way back here really changes which of these chains is being sent out, the clean one or the distorted one. So if I turn this, now the clean one is at 6 and the dirty one is at negative infinity. If I turn it the other way, dirty one's at 6, the clean one is at effectively negative infinity. So that's just distortion dry wet using sort of a different set of controls. But then if we go a step farther back, what we get is two other chains that still have exactly the same things. So this is still that same synth with the same distortion and clean channel, but there is a pair of them or a set of them that are susceptible to being detuned and a pair that are not. So here in the signs detuned chain, you can see that this knob is mapped to something. So turning that knob here doesn't do anything to this knob, whereas turning that knob here does do something to this. So the reason for that, the reason that one of them is sort of permanently tuned and one of them is permanently detuned in this particular way is so that I can do this trick, which is if I look at tuned, that's passing through a gate. And that gate is set to flip mode, which means that the gate closes when audio from the kick comes through. Whereas this one, that same gate in the signal chain, is not set to flip mode. So audio from this one only comes through when sound from the kick comes through, whereas on the tuned one, audio only comes through when sound from the kick is not coming through. So the result is when the kick plays along with this sine sound, the sound becomes detuned. So this is just another way of sort of adding a layer of dynamic interaction across two instruments. Let's hear how those things sound together. So you can hear as the kick is hitting, it is both distorting and pulling out of tune these sine waves. So that's how that group with the sines and the noise works. next, let's talk about this channel called Feedback. This is really something that is sort of based off of a patch by Ned Rush that he demonstrates on his YouTube channel. It's sort of all based on this operator that is playing these different frequencies that are sort of detuned from each other, and their levels are dependent on this volume control inversely. So these become louder as this one becomes quieter, and this one becomes quieter as these ones become louder. So right now that overtone volume control is actually mapped to this LFO. So let's unmap that real quick so I can kind of talk about what's going on here. So first of all, it's just a basic sine wave initially. Let's do that. But I'm passing it through an amp and a cabinet and a distortion and a reverb and then typical gate sidechain compressor filter. Like that's been on every channel. So if I turn off, let's just turn off the amp and the cabinet, the distortion and the reverb. So we're really just getting the dry signal. So what we're hearing is this just at pitch, and then this playing the third harmonic detuned by 118. And that's sort of a little quiet. But as I change this overtone volume, and all of that passed into the effects that we're using ends up with this really kind of howling feedback sound. The goal of this, for me at least, was to try and emulate the sound of no input mixer feedback without having to fuck up a mixer. So let's hear that. That's the normal sound. And all these different things add a lot of different character to the sound. So So that's really what's going on with this sound, and then I'm just modulating it with a bunch of different stuff. And again, there's this gate that is sidechained to the kick drum and flipped so that when the kick is playing, this sound isn't coming through. So let's listen to just that and the kick together. So the cool thing about this patch from Ned Rush is that while, yeah, it sounds like feedback, you still have a pretty significant amount of control over like what pitches are actually coming out of the feedback. So So there's still a lot of control, and that ends up being a significant feature in the track, where it really starts off as a pretty simple feedback sound in D. Right? But as you move through the track, it becomes more and more complicated, with not only having sort of more emphasis on these upper partials, but also playing higher and higher notes within the spectrum. So that's pretty cool. The last thing is this crusher sound. And this is a synth that, again, is relatively simple. Just uses analog, some noise, some sawtooth waves. And, I'm doing some modulation. There's a filter. There's a distortion. Or really, that's a wave shaper, I guess. Gain management. And then sidechain gate, sidechain compressor. That's kind of all that's in that particular channel, but this thing ends up being, in my opinion, pretty expressive and useful. So really just changing some of the parameters of the noise, the filter, and then the saturator does a whole lot for this particular patch. The other thing that's worth pointing out is that this filter resonance, which is this filter resonance, is actually mapped to this envelope follower. So the kick then is adding resonance to the filter that's on this channel. So let's do that. So you can really hear that. You can really hear what's going on there, where the kick is pushing that resonance. And again, that's just a way to add interaction across instruments, just like the thing where these gates are side chained and sort of working on opposite levels with each other. So that's it. That's Carrion. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one.